I have to say okay to that? No. So yes, today I'm going to talk about why I think that supporting women who become mothers is important. It not only makes common sense, but it makes business sense. Before I go into a bit more about who I am and why I set Bump and Glide up and why Bump and Glide exists, I thought I would start with 2 questions to get your sense. And actually, as we're in a small group, it may make for some quite lovely discussions. These are the 2 questions I thought we could think about first. So one is, do we place enough importance on supporting women in business when they become mothers? And could we be doing better from a communication and wellbeing perspective? Whether or not those on the call are mothers, want to be mothers, know mothers, have a mother, work with mothers, generally mothers are everywhere. So it kind of makes sense that we need to include them in everything they do, in everything we do in terms of business. So does anybody have any thoughts of those questions before I delve into a bit more depth?
I'm just in awe of anyone who combines motherhood with business, indeed pretty much any form of work, because it's just such a challenge, and I think we guys don't really recognize that.
Thank you, Rob. I would agree.
Sorry, I'll just say something as well. So it's funny because I've been having a conversation with my daughter recently because she's nearly 29, and it's amazing how many companies don't support leave when you have like maternity leave. They don't have it in their business at all, and it's actually putting some of her friends off. There's 2 actually who decided not to have children because they couldn't afford to take that time off work. And I just thought, you would think in this time and age that it would be important for every single organisation to have it, but it's surprising how many still don't have that in place if they're a smaller organisation.
Absolutely, and I think some people say kind of they say, oh well, it's a lifestyle choice to have children. Well,
yeah,
not really a lifestyle choice, because actually if we don't have children, then we will just disappear. So some of us will still have children, and I think if we decide that that's going to be us, then that support should be in place. I agree. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, really.
No, I was just quite surprised. I know, like when I had my children like 33 years ago, that you sort of had the 12 weeks off and that was it. You just went straight back to work. And I really thought that things have progressed during this time, but it was still sad to see that there are still problems out there in the workplace with support.
It's a very sad reflection, isn't it, of current values, given that legislation's in place. It's not as if the law doesn't say it's important.
No,
exactly. And I think I think what hopefully this is exactly the conversation, to see kind of where people are at in terms of thinking and their experiences. And I think what I'm hoping to show today is actually the support doesn't always need to be like a huge paycheck. It's actually that well-being and that communication element which are really, really important.
Lovely, thank you.
So I'll go on to a bit about who I am. So I am a mother. I had a background in communication. So I had a 12-year career in the corporate world, in the wines and spirits industry. And then I went on to have my children, stayed on with that company for a little while, and then quickly realized after having a second that it wasn't going to be possible. I stress that I don't accuse the company I worked for the lack of support. When I talk about lack of support, it's overall lack of support in terms of society as well. So it's not just organizations, because I come at it from the angle that organizations genuinely, if you sit them down, they would want to help, but they don't always know how, and they don't know where to start. So I also found that mental health was a big issue, especially then going into the pandemic. Depression and anxiety were sky high. And if you were having a baby at that time and losing a job or deciding to leave work after having a baby, it was a really worrying time. So I trained in mental health first aid to kind of have that extra support in place for people as well. Why Bump and Glide? The name does make people smile sometimes. The bump is obvious, I think, because you will have a bump physically, but it's a bump in life as you knew it, in the road, as it were. And the glide is very much, if you were to visualize a glider, if you had 10 people gliding down from the same position, I don't think they would all end up at the same position. And that's very much, once you've had a baby, you then need to navigate that time and glide to the point you want to get to. And the support I offer over that time is to help women glide back to where they need to get to retain some of that confidence and that self-esteem and that belief in themselves. That's from a women's perspective. And that for me is obvious, and it's obvious for every single mother I speak to. However, because my background was from coming out of a company, I realized that actually companies could benefit from this support. Not in terms of teaching them how to have a baby, because they're not interested in that part, but giving them that education and that knowledge piece of how do we need to communicate with these people at different stages of their journey? What can we put into place to help them have a better experience of it? And how can we get them back into the workforce fully functional in a way? And when I say fully functional, that's emotionally, physically, mentally, from their relationships and their personal lives as well. I thought it interesting because this is set up from my own lived experience. And like many other people, I thought, oh, maybe it's just me. Everybody else seems to have their stuff together, as it were. Look at social media and, you know, perfect images are plastered everywhere. So maybe it was just me finding it a bit tough. So I dug a little deeper and I did a bit of research and constantly find ongoing data, some of which I've put up on the next slide, of the actual percentages and reasons why this support is so crucial. So today it's quite apt. It's actually World Maternal Mental Health Day. So when I booked this talk in a few months ago, I hadn't actually realized at the time and I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. And then as this date approached, I thought, well, this is the perfect opportunity to talk about this on today of all days. So 1 in 5 women will experience perinatal mental health problems. Peri means around and natal around birth. So perinatal can be anywhere from pregnancy. It's said to around a year, but now it's about around 2 years after birth. There are various reasons for perinatal mental health problems, and it can be having existing mental health problems. It could be to do your current environment. It could be to do a lot of things, but one of the big reasons is a lack of support. And compared to countries in Africa or China, around the world, where motherhood is valued, they're not meant to do anything, at least for that first 40 days, apart from feed the baby, feed themselves and recover. In some Chinese cultures, I don't know if you know about this, but women get a massage every day after birth for 40 days to help blood circulation, to help recovery, to help that kind of, you know, well-being aspect. In our country and other European countries, we're told, what do you mean you had a baby last week? You know, you get back into those clothes, you've got to get back to work. What are you doing? You know, go for a run. You've got to get back into that fitness regime. You've got to do this, you've got to do that. And there is so much pressure on women. And yet actually our bodies are the same as that woman having that massage every day for 40 days. And yet we are under a lot more pressure to get back to it. Hence the reason of this mental health nightmare, really. Sadly, 70% will hide those feelings because they don't want to come across as not being able to cope, as coming across as being weak, as coming across and not being as good as, you know, the other person next door. And that is actually really crucial for people to realize, because we need to be able to be there to catch them. From an economy perspective, because people do like numbers, we do spend over £8 billion a year on perinatal mental health issues, which equates to about £10,000 per birth, and that is coming out of our pockets. So I don't promise, and I will show on another slide, I don't promise that I can fix all these issues, because actually it goes deeper than the support I can offer. But the support I can offer is catching that well-being element so that women are more confident and more capable of addressing the challenges that come up, rather than being isolated and left to just deal with them in their own way. This I thought was an interesting quote, and I know that Astrid is involved in UN Women, so maybe when she listens back to this, she'll see this quote. But they quote that when more women work, economies grow. So that's a fact. Women's economic empowerment increases economic diversification and income equality for shared prosperity. And this is just mind-blowing. It's estimated that closing the gender gap could give the global economy a $7 trillion boost. $7 trillion. So we're spending over 8 billion just in the UK alone on the perinatal mental health issues. And actually, if we assist and support those women back into the workplace, then we could actually be helping the economy grow as well. So that's when I say it makes business sense. It makes total business sense to support women, because when women become mothers, we have this vision that, oh, just let's leave her to it, or let her rock the baby, or give her a little fluffy baby grow to go with the baby. But actually underneath, you've got that woman who was still that woman before, she's just had an additional identity. Which brings me on to some comments that I got from women when I did a survey, when I set Bump and Glide up. Again, thinking it was just me, and I thought, is this a good idea? Maybe I'll find something else to do. I pulled together a survey, and the responses I got were like some of these that you'll see on the screen. And it was upsetting and frustrating to see that it wasn't just me. Some of these were most stressful time in my life. The contact sometimes with companies isn't fantastic. A little anecdote that I'll say, somebody who spoke to me about wanting to do one of her kit days, which is a keeping in touch day, got herself together, got all the logistics, childcare sorted, turned up 20 minutes early than she should have been to her office, and the office was all boarded up with a sign on the door saying move location. So when I say communication is important, it is so important. And that woman felt pretty deflated. She said she sat down and cried because she had put so much pressure on herself to get there, and she was ready to face the day, and they hadn't even been bothered to tell her that the office had moved. That is an extreme case, but there are plenty of cases where people just feel a bit left out and sidelined when they come back after having a baby. There are things you can do. There are things that I do with people, working on both sides. As I said, if you work with the women to bolster that confidence, to work on strategies for them to understand their identity. A lot of people don't know this word, but the word matrescence is a good word to know. Does anybody here know or has heard of the word matrescence? Okay. Have you heard of the word adolescence? Okay. So adolescence and matrescence, there's a similarity. When children become adults, that's adolescence. When women become mothers, that's matrescence. So it was a term coined by an anthropologist in the early 70s called Dana Raphael. And she talked about that huge transition that is becoming a mother, as in you change on all levels, on all fronts. And there's more research into how our brains are rewired, how the neuroplasticity is incredible, rather than laughing about having mum brain when you put your keys in the fridge instead of in the car. It's because our focus is being pulled towards something, bigger than what you had in terms of that kind of perspective and awareness. So some of these are surprising, some are unsurprising, but overall, this is kind of a general comment structure from people who haven't had the support they need when they become mums. What I said, I'm going to come on to a little bit more detail about what I can do, but what I can't do is some of these things. The reason I put this slide up is because this issue is bigger than me. It's bigger than Bump and Glide. It's bigger than the 6 of us on this call. There are a lot of threads to this problem, as there are in a lot of problems in the world. And what I can't do is fix the cost of childcare, fix the gender pay gap, fix the flexible working issue, the maternity and paternity pay, or the cost of living crisis. When you see these things listed, you can recognize how many issues there are that involve this specific issue of parenthood and motherhood and work. But what's important to realize that actually, if you can support the areas where you can find the appropriate support, those people can then better address these other issues and better use their voice. But when you lose that confidence, you tend to lose your voice. So what I can do, and this is quite a wordy slide, so I'm not going to read the whole slide, but I can provide personalised and informed research-driven wellbeing support for people and companies. What that means is that I don't just sit down and say, I think you should do this because that should be a nice thing to do. I will sit down with companies and see where they're at on their journey, whether they've got 8 people, 80 people, or 800 people. Every session I provide is bespoke to what their organisation values are, whatever budget they have available, and I will assist them in just enhancing what they already have in place. Why should we do it? It's one of the most important and vulnerable times in a woman's life and career. From my own lived experience and a lot of people of, let's say, my age bracket, you spend a good 10 plus years building a career. And then there are too many women falling off that career once they have children, which is sad, not only for them, but it's also sad for the businesses, because you've built up that career, you've built up those contacts, you've built up that credibility, you've built up the reputation for the business, and overnight you go. Now, there's a financial cost for the business because it costs, I think, middle management around maybe 30K to recruit somebody of middle management level now, whereas a talk from me doesn't cost that much. A few maternity mentoring sessions doesn't cost that much. And it keeps the women in that business who you have invested in terms of their training, in terms of the years of experience. I educate organizations about this period, as I say, because giving them the information on what matrescence is, what the motherhood penalty is, what the maternal wall is, all the different things that for most people are kind of like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But in a succinct kind of way, you can just give people those bullet points of what to say, what not to say, and how best to support women at that point. And team members who don't have children, importantly, because they won't always recognise why people suddenly have to leave at the drop of a hat and how to support them. I provide tools and strategies to help women reflect and accept what's changed, offering that kind of relationship of trust, as I said, that safe space for them to talk to somebody who isn't their line manager, who isn't their partner, because sometimes you don't want to talk to people you know, you'd rather just talk to somebody else who's neutral. I focus on the positive. So some of you know me on this call, some of you have met me on this call. I pretty much think I'm a positive person. I like to find the solutions. We're all really good at talking about what's wrong, which I have done a little bit in this talk. But I like to focus on, okay, we know what's wrong, but how are we going to fix it? How can we offer those solutions? And I am coming at it from one angle and saying, well, actually, I've got a solution to that wellbeing bit and to those few months in between, which it is just a transitional phase, really. But if you support people well, you will keep them for that phase afterwards as well. The last slide before leaving you with some contact details and some questions would be to list the benefits, because again, it's obvious to look after people at different life stages. Having children is one of them. Menopause is another that's getting a lot of, thankfully, awareness. What I tend to say is that if you are a menstruating woman, you will go through the menopause. So that is hugely important in terms of support. I think the importance dwindles around pregnancy because it is still seen as a choice rather than everybody goes through it. So yeah, so that's kind of how I see it. I don't see it as any less important than the menopause because it's still a huge life transition. And I think it deserves a bit more importance, really. So the benefits of offering the support are, from a communication perspective, we know the benefits to a woman because it helps her on that journey, but the benefits for a company, when you're thinking about the new generation of people looking for work, they've moved on from looking for just a good pay, pension, healthcare package. They want to see what companies are doing around wellbeing and mental health. They want to see how they're thinking outside the box and how they're supporting people inside and outside the workplace. So it provides that positive company image, both internally and externally. So whether or not you're trying to retain your talent or you're trying to recruit more talent, it works in both ways. It promotes well-being and mental health. it supports staff well-being, and it shows that the business knows about the importance of these life stages. And it makes people feel more valued and respected and heard a lot of the time, because it's a time when you just think, oh, I don't think I'll say anything because they don't really care. It improves women's confidence, but it improves line managers and teams' confidence in terms of how they talk around people going through this life stage as well, and how they welcome them back into a business. And it makes people feel included at a time when a lot of people in my survey said they felt abandoned and isolated, and sidelined. So I think it's very much, it's a small element of support in terms of the journey of somebody's career, but actually if you get that right, they will stay, but they will also talk about how well their company looks after them, because people talk a lot nowadays, and you won't have a chance to pick up the pieces if you don't provide that right support, really. So some of these things you may have heard of in terms of the data before, but hopefully that's been informative. It would be great to have some questions or some conversation now about the subject or about things you've heard. And what I will do is I'll leave all my details there. And feel free to get in touch if you have questions that you don't want to ask on this group. I'm really happy for you to get in touch personally. But what I do is, just in terms of the sessions or in terms of, you know, supporting people, it can be anywhere from 20 weeks of pregnancy for individuals all the way to getting them back to work. And it's talks and sessions within companies about these subjects. So I delve into more detail into whichever subject they want me to focus on. Matrescences tends to be quite a good one, because that's gaining a little bit more awareness in terms of what it means and how it impacts people. But it's very much having that conversation, and I think talking at people for a certain length of time isn't my style because I do like having a two-way conversation. But yes, anything you want to hear more about, then I'm happy to chat. But thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. There is a great deal to think about in what you've said there, and you've painted a picture of a big range of support that can be given. Do you think there's one particular priority area that employers should be thinking about, or is there perhaps there's no typical employer any more than there's no typical mother?
I think well, what I didn't mention over the course of that is the fact that the research I'm doing at the moment is focusing on one aspect of it, which is the maternity mentoring. So I wanted to do some research and then got talking to somebody, and they said, oh, well, you should probably speak to the university about that, because they often do these impact research projects, which is now what I'm doing. So we're looking at the impact that maternity mentoring has on women and subsequently their employers, because if the support I'm offering this group in this research project is successful and they go back to work, you know, confident, and they, you know, a couple who I'm speaking to are considering going for promotion, if they actually do go for those promotions, then it shows potentially that this kind of extra support is beneficial. Just like there are loads of threads to this subject, there are loads of ways of supporting. So that's a really good question. The toolkit that I've created is something that I can, you know, give to a company, work with the company, and I have, you know, a booklet for the employee, a booklet for the line manager, and I work through with them over, you know, the course of several months in terms of those sessions. So it's kind of checking in, and it's very much, it sounds crazy, but it's very much just listening and giving them strategies to whatever business strategies they have in place, so enhancing what they do, really. So it's having those conversations, because you're right, there isn't a typical business like there isn't a typical person. Every business is at a specific stage on their journey. Some of them are doing things, some of them, one of my mentees recently said that her husband has been given 6 months full pay paternity leave, and he can take it, you know, at different chunks of time, which again is brilliant, because that means he's more around. But that doesn't give them the knowledge that, or doesn't give her that kind of extra support that she could have on a one-to-one basis as well, or the company for that matter to welcome her back once she's back at work as well. Do you know of any businesses offering a specific type of support around this time?
No, no, but it's no, I don't. I mean, it's something that's quite likely to come across our bows, because with our staff, who are younger females, and are settling down in that period, or that transition where their motherhood is probably a year or two down the road for them, I would think. So it's good to be prepared and have some understanding of how we can better support them. But at the moment, it's my wife's knowledge, my knowledge on how we best do it is probably fairly low. So it's something we've got to prepare ourselves. It's probably best to get some solid ideas and thoughts, and so when it does happen, we can say, right, well, this is what we can do, or you can do, and vice versa. A bit of
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's a forward thinking and a progressive way of thinking that I think companies need to have that thought process more. And also saying to ourselves, look, you look at your business, let's say for sake of argument, you've got 12 people in your business. Not every single person is going to be a woman, and not every single person is going to go and have a child. So actually having this type of support kind of on offer doesn't mean that every single person is going to take you up on it, but it does give your company that positive image of, this is, we consider this to be an important part of, what we offer employees, type thing.
Yes, yeah, that's thinking. I thought.
Yeah, I think there's two very different but important aspects to it. One is just the humanity of supporting someone appropriately as they go into pregnancy and motherhood. But there is, as you say, also that reputational point about making your business sound like a great place to work, that encourages people to stay, encourages other people to join it.
Absolutely, because I think it's no longer, I mean, we would love for everybody to do the right thing. Obviously, the world would be a fantastic place if everybody did the right thing. But I'm not naive, and I know that businesses obviously need to look at how they make money and the productivity, and why, how they get their businesses to work. So we need to make this work all around. And actually, if you do the right thing, but it also benefits your business positively in terms of whether it's company image or being more attractive to more talent, then it is a win for the business as well. And it also means that you're going to retain the staff you've got, because they can see that you value what needs to be valued in today's world. That way, especially the new generation, as I said, they're not as interested. When you look at people's CVs, people used to stay with a large company maybe for 20-30 years. Nowadays, people are quite quick to get that experience, then to move on. So if you want to keep those people, you need to have more than just your name and how much you're paying people, really.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good learning curve. It's a very good learning curve.
Serena, it's really interesting that businesses are sort of bringing you in to talk about this really important sort of aspect of how to manage when women are in that phase of their life. And I think it really reflects on probably the change in the importance of company culture. Because if they're thinking that far ahead, then obviously they're getting a few other bits right. So that's actually really quite cheering to hear, because a lot of companies, I personally worked for a couple who were sort of stuck 20 years in the past. And, they tick the box, but they actually haven't changed the culture to catch up. So
absolutely, yeah. It's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk. I think there's a very similar thread of conversation about climate and sustainability and greenwashing. You can say you're doing this, but actually deep down, are you really doing it? So there was another campaign that was launched just yesterday, I think, called Parenting Out Loud, by this guy called Elliot Ray, who shouts a lot about fatherhood and how to put men more at the front, and talk about what flexibility they need, because in the traditional sense, a lot of women are kind of leaving the workforce. But when I was talking about the things I can't fix, one of those things is the gender pay gap. And actually, until we fix the gender pay gap, then the women are going to be the ones to go, because of the cost of living crisis, we can't actually survive on just the women's wage if she's earning less than the man. So it's kind of, I appreciate, and I'm fully aware of all the different challenges, but it's kind of, we have to find where we're passionate and where our drive lies. And if everybody can do it from their own angles, then maybe we could make it better. But yes, companies are doing it. I can see companies getting people in to talk about the menopause, which is great. So as soon as I see that, I think, okay, what are you doing in this space? So it just means if they're progressive and forward thinking enough to bring people in to talk about one life stage, what's stopping them from talking about this other life stage, which actually is a whole other cohort in the organization, depending on the size of company, obviously. But it can be a company of 4 people. Again, as I was saying with you, Chris, it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter the size of the company. If you want to shout about the fact that you're actually considering, that you're actually offering this as a service, it's that progressive thought process of who am I trying to attract, and who do I want to come and work in my business who has that awareness of looking after themselves, really.
I'd agree. That's good.
It's interesting how menopause has actually become a much more talked about topic at the moment, and maybe that's because it's coming from such a long way back that it's got the spotlight, but it seems to be a more talked about subject than motherhood at the moment, or matrescence.
To
try and bed your phrase in my head.
But it's true, and I think it's devastating, and it's sad, obviously, from where I'm sitting, because of the amount of research and what I know about it, even research aside, I bump into mothers every day at the school gates, and it's, we need a Davina McCall to shout about it. But I think that the problem is people talk about the negatives a lot, which is why I do. You probably you can hear I get exasperated by the negative side of things, because actually we know there's a problem, but just constantly talking about the problem isn't going to fix it. So yes, there are problems in all these different areas, but actually we just need to address it, or see why people are talking about menopause so much. But it's been a long time coming, we've so do we have to wait that long for maternity, or are we actually focusing on the right element of maternity? I don't know.
I think it's the latter. There's a tendency to think, well, we've got maternity pay legislation in place, we've got equality legislation in place, it's job done, let's get back to making some profit. But actually making some profit is about treating your people right.
Absolutely. Your business can't exist without the people, and your people are your business, essentially. They're the ones who are going to talk about your business. They're the people who are, it took me a while to put my previous identity of who I used to work for one side. I was always Serena from that company for several years. So your work is part of your identity. And I think it's tragic when a woman wants to stay with that workplace, but is either pushed out or can't make it work after having a child, because not only does she have to get used to the new identity of becoming a mother, she suddenly has to try and work hard to forget that identity and find a new one. Because the cost of living, we tend to need 2 incomes nowadays to actually make it work.
And that's a point, isn't it? You're not a person with the same need when you come back to the workplace as a mother. Now suddenly you have got to think about being in the right place at the right time of day to do the duty that you've got to do with your family, or at least making sure that your partner's doing it. Wishful thinking.
Yeah. Oh, they do. But people kind of see mothers coming back as less focused, or they're just going to be thinking about this, thinking about that. I mean, to put things into perspective, what I just said is we all have to work nowadays. If you don't have to work, then it's either a luxury or you're in trouble, so you have to make it work. And I haven't actually ever been more focused as I have been since I've been a mother, because you have that time, you have to fit everything in. So, if I'm working on a school day where my husband isn't around, I have that chunk of time to be fully focused, and I get a lot done. I don't have the odd tea break. I don't go out for an hour and a half lunch with a colleague or whatever, which, don't get me wrong, I used to love doing that as well. But I know the time I have, and I know the jobs I need to get done. And you are super focused. And I think it's 64% of women have actually said they're more ambitious after having children. I heard that statistic this morning or yesterday. So I think businesses have to realize that as well, and kind of wake up to the fact that women want to work. They just need to have that infrastructure in place to make it happen.
Let's think about what you're saying at the start about the pressure on women, especially, get back out there, go and get it done. And like you say, just to be able to juggle everything in that focus. on my personal experience, I suddenly found myself bending time and space so I could fit everything in and get to work on time, have the childcare in place, get to the school gate. But I still had that guilt. Like if one of them was sick and the nursery rang up, I'd feel guilty that I'd have to leave work and go and sort that out. And again, that comes back to a company culture thing. And if you know that's in place, what you're doing is fantastic, because then the individual would be a lot more relaxed about asking for that help, or knowing that there's a yes, you've got to go, that's fine, we'll see you tomorrow, sort your family out. And then
absolutely, yeah. I think mum guilt is one of the biggest things. Mum guilt, the mother load also, the mental load. I can be sitting here right now, I'm not, because I'm fully focused on this, but I could be sitting doing something thinking, oh, did I do that for dinner? How I put that? Did I buy that for their packed lunch? Or did I call my mum because I know she's doing this, and oh, did I put that wash in? Oh, it's never going to be dry. They're not going to have this. And you've got this internal monologue, or did I have to do that for and as well as doing all your work? But we seem to do it all, but you have to kind of have extra support in place in various sectors of your life so that you don't get that overwhelmed. And don't get me wrong, partners and fathers do have their own things as well, and they're not always accepted. Some people say to dads, oh, you babysitting this weekend if mom's going away. No, I'm not babysitting, I'm their father, so actually I'm fathering my children, I'm not babysitting. So I joke, it is getting better, but there are still those kind of assumptions that mum is the one who needs to know about it all, and who needs to get that call from nursery if the child's sick.
yes. Always the first number.
I actually put on the form of my children, yes, this is my number, but my husband is also around, so please call both.
Other parents are available.
Yes, exactly. Other parents aren't an option; they are there. So, but I think it's also about that support network. We don't live in a society where we all are lucky enough to have extended family on the doorstep. I have 3 friends actually who, in the last 3 years, their parents have moved within a few roads of them because they couldn't actually juggle. They couldn't actually make it all work. So the parents have actually made a move and literally moved location to be closer to the children, to be around for the grandchildren. So it is an issue. Again, not the issue of the childcare that I can fix, but things are improving. But this is an area where businesses can step up, and they don't need to wait for a law to pass. Is actually thinking about, oh, this could probably be the right thing to do. So to consider it, really.
Great. Well, thank you, Serena. There's been some very good conversations there. So unless anyone's got any other comments or questions, I think we'll go away and think about the points that you've made.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Serena. That was really, really, really interesting. Thank you. Good stuff.
Thank you.